and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Roop. Nice to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, let's start with our first and biggest question. What is the stigma of mental health, especially in the context of South Asian communities? We know that talking about mental health in our families, it's a topic that we try to avoid. It's not something that happens in our families. We just pretend it does not exist. Why does that stigma exist?
Absolutely. Good question, Roop. So, before we go to stigma, let's try to understand what mental health is, right? So, when we talk about mental health, just like a physical health, it's part of who we are. It's part of our being, right? But definitely there is stigma. So, basically, mental health refers to the stage of a person's well-being, right? That enables them to realize their full potential and right work and manage daily normal stresses of life and be productive. Now when this gets hampered to a certain extent is when one a person's mental health is being impacted. So mental health, just like your physical health, can go up and down, and it's on a spectrum. So for example, Roop, today I'm doing great, right? I still have the normal stresses of life, but my mental health, I would say, is more towards the positive side of the spectrum. Now, let's say tomorrow something happens. There's a loss. There's something, right? There's an event that isn't the best. Then obviously my moods and emotions are going to be down. And if I don't get the opportunities to process them and deal with them in the right way, then my mental health is definitely going to get lower. And sometimes when that happens for long periods of time, then we slowly start moving towards the other end. So if you think of your mental health in terms of a spectrum with two arrows which keeps on going, and mental illness and mental health on one side, most of us fall in the middle, depending on what's happening to us. Right. So then, when we talk about mental illness, stigma with regards to mental health, it basically refers to negative attitudes and that produce negative behaviors, right? Which usually leads to um, negative behaviors and stereotypes, labeling people, and it furthers that. Now, in terms of what, where do, like if we take the East Indian community or the Southeast Asian community, for example, we do have an issue now. That, not to say that in the Western world there isn't stigma around mental health, there definitely is, but it's more within our communities. It's seen more as a taboo thing, right? And then when we say mental health, people immediately associate it with the extreme, which is mental illness, and that in itself becomes a barrier for people to talk about the normal stresses of life or when life gets tough. So people think that they need to cope on their own. Reaching out is a sign of weakness, and so on and so forth, right? So that this kind of creates this kind of a vicious circle. Okay.
A quick question about mental health. When you feel sad on a day and then the next day you feel really happy, or perhaps like circumstances changed and then you went back to being sad again, is that a sign of bad mental health, or is that something that's very normal?
Okay, so that's a good question, Roop. Now the thing is, right, like there's no black and white to that. It would depend. So for example, what that actually describes is bipolar, right? But then if that's happening on an ongoing basis, and again, a person with bipolar doesn't go from sad to happy from day to day, right? So that could be a couple of things, and it would not be helpful for us to say this is what it is, because it could be, sometimes it could be personalities, sometimes it could be just the way I function, or sometimes it could be something deeper, right? So to arrive with a diagnosis, we'll have to do various assessments and all these things before we say what that is.
Mm-hmm. But would that be something that I would have to go see a doctor about? Let's say I'm experiencing this, like for a week or 2 weeks, I am perfectly normal. There's no issues in my life whatsoever. I'm very
Mm-hmm.
happy. And then comes a weekend where I do not want to get out of bed. Is that something that could we say that, oh, maybe I just had an off week or off weekend, or is that something I should be consulting my doctor for?
Yeah. So if it was just for a week or two, I would say, right, maybe it's just life happening. Sometimes you were coping with a lot, and then your body and mind is saying, take a break. But if this happens, let's say for more than 2 weeks or consistently for 2 weeks, then I would say go talk to your family doctor. They'll do an assessment. And then if they see signs and symptoms are more than what it actually should be, then they're going to say, see a psychiatrist or go for counseling, right? Again, seeing a psychiatrist and counseling can be both required or either one, because
Mm,
right now we live in a day and world where it's like, here, pop this meds, right, which shouldn't be happening. But basically no one should be under medicated or over medicated,
mm-hmm.
right? So
And
it,
also,
so go ahead, sorry.
also for women, we hear this often, like when you have your period.
Hmm.
In that week, perhaps you're feeling low, or maybe the week after too. Like we always hear about PMS, but I think I've heard in a few of my friends, it's just the week after the period as well. Like there are sometimes that it's that downtime where um perhaps like you're you just don't you're not happy or you don't feel like yourself. So
Hmm.
it's really hard to distinguish that. Like let's say every month you're feeling that during the period or before the period or after the period, whatever time frame that you feel depressed in. So if you're feeling that consistently month after month, is that a mental health problem or is it just that your body is physically going through
So
changes?
the body and mind are connected, right? So it could be a combination, we don't know, right? And that's why, right, an individual will have to go and get the different tests done. And so for example, I have clients who have that PMS syndrome where it's severe, where they are on medication, and they see me as well, right? So it has to be more holistic depending on what's going on with the individual.
Hmm. Interesting. So everyone, so if you, I think if you feel that your mental health or you're not able to get out of that dark phase, then perhaps like it's time to go see a doctor.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like occasionally feeling sad is normal.
Hmm.
Like everyone feels sad. That's not a problem. But if you're unable to pull out of that dark phase or if it's impacting your day to day
Exactly.
existence, then it's time to go see a doctor and ask them for help. Okay. So we talked about stigma. So, what are some of the causes for the stigma? Even in of course in South Asian cultures, but even in Western cultures, like you mentioned, the stigma around mental health exists, but in South Asian cultures it's a little bit more amplified
Hmm.
because perhaps because of lack of exposure or it's been generationally that's what we've been taught, that these are the things that we have to hide, these are weaknesses, it's the vulnerabilities that we always have to keep hidden about ourselves and about our families. So can you talk about that? So why do you think the stigma exists?
So a couple of reasons, right? I mean, globally, I think when we say mental health, the human mind gravitates towards mental illness, right? So we need to first start catching ourselves and gain this. And one of the main reasons, Roop, is because for a very long time we've been following the medical model for mental health, which is I have a diagnosis, I have a cure, and then I get going. So that has to change, and that's what the field of mental health has been. We've been moving towards, right? So we're moving more towards the recovery model where you view your mental health as a journey, right? So there's no end point, it's ongoing. So that in itself will remove the shame and the stigma. So let's say, okay, let's say, for example, I lose a job or there was workplace harassment or I lose a loved one. Now, during that period, I may go very low, right? And then hopefully I recognize what's going on with me, I reach out for help, I talk to professionals, and I get helped for a period of 6 months. I'm just giving you an example here. And after that, I might start feeling way more better, and that's okay, right? So for me to hide that part of my life shouldn't be the case, right?
Hmm.
And that's why, right, we're working on this in workplaces. We're starting to talk about this, like anyone's mental health can be impacted. We don't have to stigmatize people. If someone was not doing well for a period of 6 months, a year, or a month or so, it doesn't mean they can't get back to work, right? So these are the things we have to start challenging now within our own communities where we're very conservative. Just, I mean, there's so many goods, don't get me wrong, group, there's so many good things to our communities, right? And I think traditionally how we have, like for example, the Hindu way of life, if you see it, it's like very based with nature. It's a beautiful way of life where there's so many day-to-day practices that lead to positive mental health. right? For example, seniors, they get up in the morning, the first thing they do is they take a shower and then they pray. What is that? That's meditation. That's the meditation that I would advise my client to do, right? So there's so many things that are embedded in our culture, which is really good. But sometimes, right, when life gets harder, things happen, and then when you immigrate to another country, there's so many things that go on even within the family, within the different generations, and then we don't talk about it. We And then there's this other fear of within the community. So if I reach out, who knows who, like if it's Anne, like does Anne know someone in my community? People don't understand that there is this confidentiality piece that I need to abide by, right? So if someone, I'm not going to counsel someone who I know. That would be conflict of interest, right? So sometimes that lack of awareness and information makes people to still, right, hold themselves back, and it increases stigma. And then there's also this fear that if I see a counselor, something is fundamentally wrong with me. That has to change. I may just be maybe even transitioning to a new job, and I need someone to not judgmentally sit there and listen to me and help me think through that process, right? Or I may be in a new relationship, I may be a new parent, right? There's so many things that one may need counseling for, right? So that has to shift. So traditionally in our communities, all those needs were taken care of by what we call natural supports within the community. But when you immigrate, quite often immigrants don't have those supports, and then they don't have those supports. They're not aware of the supports in the community, or they have stigma around it. They fear to reach out. So there's so many reasons that lead to this, to continue to stay there.
Hmm. So, what can be done to destigmatize? Of course, one of the is what we're doing right now. We're talking about it and we're trying to normalize it. What are the other things that can be done?
So the other things are, right, like one is key is education awareness, continuing to have these conversations within families, within the community, and also institutions and organizations structures. There is a gap, right? They are also trying to bridge that. Of course, do we have a lot of work to do? Absolutely, right? And then they're not enough, for example, people of color who work as therapists or in the field to support these people. So the different areas where work has to happen. But for sure, I would, so as an individual, what do? I can't change the world, but I can definitely think of the circle of influence. I can influence seven people around me, right? So the more positive conversations we have, the better it's going to get.
And I've often heard in our communities that adults would tell their children if a child comes to you with a problem, and the adult would say, oh, just it's just all in your head. Just be strong, be tough, and write it out. And I did it when I was younger. I used to walk 25 kilometers from my village to the city, and every day, and I accomplished this and I accomplished that. You can do anything. I brought you to Canada, and I'm talking about immigrant families here, and I personally experienced it. I personally heard it many times, where you mental health or mental illness too, sometimes it goes undiagnosed because parents think that they know, that they've experienced life and they know the best way to live that life. So what is the difference between a parent counseling a child and someone trained to counsel a child? How would that approach be different? Why should a child be taken to a counselor when a parent can tell them about their experiences in life and teach them how to be?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the key of that, what happens is, right, when it's a parent, definitely parents care about their children, and right, I'm sure there is value to the advice they're giving their children. However, they might lack they see life through their lenses. Right now, when you go to a counselor would help that child see, they would see things objectively, right? So there's not going to be any blame. Not that parents do this intentionally, but they can be blaming, shaming, denial, suck it up, you can do it, right? Sometimes that talk helps, but not always, right? So where's that fine line, and when do we cross that fine line? Right? So what will happen in a counseling space is your counselor creates a safe space for you. A counselor is going to compassionately listen to you objectively. A counselor's role is to walk with you through that journey without stigmatizing you, without shaming you. And the counselor doesn't take away self agency from you, but the counselor helps you see things objectively and help you realize what you can do. So basically, it's like a guiding, right? You're guiding your client versus telling them what to do in a more
And what
realistic.
about counselors' children? Let's say your children need help
They didn't come to
someday,
me.
and would they come to you, or would you take them to a different counselor?
Definitely a different counselor, right? Because I can't be my family's therapist. Roop. It doesn't work. It'll definitely
Yeah.
rupture relationships.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to, is just being that family's counselor or a family's therapist, not just as a parent, even as perhaps spouse. I don't think any spouse should be carrying on the other spouse's baggage. Like, let's
Yeah,
say I come into a relationship with my baggage, and I don't think it should be my husband's responsibility to unpack it for me. I should be getting help from an outside person.
yeah, right. And it's going to be hard for the counselor to see things objectively with someone they know personally,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah,
Yeah, because I think all of us have done that in our families. All of us have somebody, or maybe ourselves, like where we need support, we need help. We turn to somebody we know because we trust them. There's that, sense of confidence, but the lines get blurred sometimes. And then I personally feel exhausted because I may not have the tools to help the other person. All I can say is that I am here for you, but I don't know the right things to say to that person. And perhaps the way I say those things may not hit them the way I intend for them to capture it as. They might see it and visualize it as entirely different. That may affect our relationship. Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster. So I think the best way is definitely to seek out services like yourself, Calgary Counselling Centre, and talk to somebody who's neutral.
for sure.
Can you talk to me about Calgary Counselling Centre? If someone had to contact you, how could they do that?
Okay, so right now, group, we are absolutely working virtually, so we are online. So if someone wants to access our services, go to Calgary Counseling, so our website. Just Google it, lead you to the website. Go to the intake page, create an intake, and if you have any preferences, please request that, like age, gender, LGBTQ plus friendly, from a certain ethnicity. We do our best to match the client with their preferences. And then we work on a sliding scale, so from $8 to $180, so everyone can access services. Other than that, a counselor will get back to you within maximum 2 to 3 days. We don't have a waiting list, whereas other services have a waiting list. So that's really a good thing.
And we'll put the link to the website in the caption. So anyone who is needing to contact Calgary Counseling Centre, please go to their website. That would be the best way to reach them. And I know you do have clients who come from all backgrounds. You have clients from South Asian community. You have clients from every age group as well.
Absolutely. Right. And we do individual counseling, family therapy, and we run groups as well. And we cater to all age groups.
Perfect. Awesome. So this was the first of our series, and we will be talking about more mental health issues in further our conversations going forward. So we'll be talking first Monday of every month, and we'll be diving deep into mental health issues. So if anyone has a question, please do send us a question, send us message, leave a comment, or call me and let me know what you want to ask Anne, and I will ask her that question in our next conversation, which is going to be next month of June, first Monday.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anne. Really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.